And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello everyone, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowen with your aviation forecast. We'll start off taking a look at flying weather across the state for Friday. Starting out, we have some IFR across the western portions of the state into the North Slope, as well as over portions of the Aleutian Islands and parts of the northern Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle as well. Most of the interior generally looking between marginal and VFR, especially across the Yukon Flats into the central interior. Friday afternoon, starting to get some of that IFR into the Alaska range. Still some IFR hanging out across the northern Gulf Coast. Still IFR lingering across the North Slope. Otherwise, again, VFR mostly now pushing north as we have a front that starts to move from south to north across the interior. And then by Saturday morning, again, marginal conditions now expected across most of the interior. Still some VFR possible along the Brooks Range. Otherwise, we do have weather moving in from the south, so we do expect marginal conditions for the most part. Some IFR again across portions of the Aleutians and still hanging out over the northern portions of the Gulf of Alaska. And then finally by Saturday afternoon, still some lingering IFR across the eastern Aleutians into the northern Gulf Coast, but finally starting to clear out across portions of the interior, especially north of the Alaska Range. Taking a look at our passes for Friday. Inactivity pass looking VFR for the most part, especially early on in the day. However, we do have some marginal conditions across the northern portions of the pass and near the northern entrance. Same story with Adigan Pass, VFR for the pass itself, but gradually deteriorating as we go farther north. And then Lake Clark and Merrill passes looking to have IFR conditions for Friday, again with a fairly large system in the Gulf of Alaska. Rainy Pass as well, looking IFR there. Friday looking at Windy Pass, starting out the day in marginal territory and then decreasing into VFR as we go throughout the day. Same story in Isabel Pass, starting off marginal and then deteriorating throughout the day. Mentasta Pass, same story. And then finally getting down to Tanita Pass, we're looking at IFR conditions towards the eastern entrance, improving gradually as we go west. And then over Portage, same story, IFR conditions across the pass itself, especially the eastern portions of the pass. However, as we go towards Turnagain Arm and then towards the Anchorage Bowl, we're looking at more marginal conditions on the western side of the pass. Chilkoot and White Pass, both IFR all day expected Friday. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we can see northern Alaska still below freezing starting at the surface. However, we do have some warmer weather that's moving up into the southwestern portions of the state. So expecting temperatures above freezing across those areas. Up to about 2,000 feet is where we're expecting freezing levels across southwest Alaska all the way down to Kodiak Island. So a second freezing level there. And then over the western portions of the state, we do have some warm air moving in aloft. So up to about 2,000 feet across portions of the eastern interior and then pushing up to 4,000 feet as we get towards the Panhandle. For icing conditions on Friday, we can expect some fairly substantial areas of up to potential moderate icing with the storm system that's going to be moving in. So over the Aleutians, generally looking at about 4,000 to 12,000 feet for those areas of moderate ice. Over the interior, so we're looking at 2,000 to 10,000 feet for areas of potential moderate with that front moving up. And then across the Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle, we can expect areas of occasional moderate ice between 6,000 to 12,000 feet in that area. Taking a look at our jet stream. So we do have some pretty strong winds aloft. However, it's mainly going to be a panhandle issue where we do have up to 120 knots over portions of the southern panhandle. Generally much lighter over the interior, over the northern Pacific. We do have a fairly substantial jet of 125 knots down there. Coming down to 9,000 feet, so much lighter winds at this level. Still about 45 to 50 knots or so across the southern panhandle. Otherwise, we're generally looking at mostly calm conditions across the interior. We do have some stronger winds through the mountains, about 40 to 45 knots. And then coming down to about 3,000 feet, we do have a fairly strong low-level jet across the North Slope, looking at about 45 knots over portions of the Beaufort Coast there. Over the Gulf of Alaska, about 40 knots is what we're expecting, especially with these stronger winds near Kodiak Island coming from Bristol Bay. And then over the Aleutians, we do have a storm system that's moving across the North Pacific, so we do expect winds about 40 to 45 knots across portions of the central Aleutians. And then finally looking at turbulence, again with those areas of stronger winds, we do expect some occasional moderate turbulence from the surface up to about 3,000 feet across the central Aleutians. Coming over back towards Kodiak Island, Gulf of Alaska area, surface to about 4,000 feet. for those moderate areas of turbulence, and then over the southern panhandle, surface to about 5, and then over the Brooks Range, again, where we do have that stronger low-level jet up against the northern Brooks Range there, surface to about 6,000 feet is where we can expect those areas of moderate turbulence. And that'll wrap up our aviation forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowen.